It is an engine that will drive the CSS animations and transitions now. It gives a nicer structure to people who come from web devs. The web examples are now almost one-to-one translatable to Reanimated API. But we also want to keep our worklets API, which gives you more power because you can basically execute arbitrary JavaScript code.
What would you say is the most exciting thing in Reanimated right now?
I am mostly excited about the native integration of Reanimated. We are currently working on a feature where we want to more use the native primitives of the given platform. So for example, on iOS, there is core animation. Core animation can actually leverage different threading mechanisms to run those animations. They can offload all of the animation logic to a separate thread called render server, which is intrinsic to the Apple ecosystem itself. And by using it, we can offer the best-in-class performance on the platform. We are currently developing that. It is an engine that will drive the CSS animations and transitions now.
Because you guys also I think it was a year ago, released a Reanimated API, which was CSS based, right?
It gives a nicer structure to people who come from web devs. The web examples are now almost one-to-one translatable to Reanimated API. But we also want to keep our worklets API, which gives you more power because you can basically execute arbitrary JavaScript code on the UI runtime. That's also powerful. So we now have the stuff that you can that can make you do arbitrary stuff, the stuff that is more aligned with web. And now we are kind of working to get that to also work with native primitives. So it kind of closes the loop of what we can do.
Is there anything right now which is quite painful in Reanimated? Anything which you say, okay, that really needs to be improved? Or are you guys kind of already working on it?
One of the biggest pain points in the last few years mostly was the integration of the new architecture. It took some time for most of the libraries of the ecosystem actually to migrate to the new architecture. But we are almost there, and in terms of Reanimated, we are actually working close with folks at Meta to get actually Reanimated to work with some shared compatibility layer on the React Native side. This way we can actually ensure that this is properly tested, and when anything changes in the core, it is actually it has to be tested against the core principles of what Reanimated works with. So now Reanimated that is building on that principles should be more stable, and we're currently closing the gap of stability.
Reanimated as a library has been it's not that React Native has has an animated library. Reanimated is the kind of React Native library.
I mean, for most parts, there are projects that use animated, and that's fine, Yeah. But whenever you need to do something more arbitrary, Reanimated is a big step up.
What's the coolest thing you have seen done with Reanimated, which was mind-blowing,
Whenever people do implement some version of shared element transitions, which is something that I've been working on, and we are still trying to nail it down, but we are implementing it most on the native C++ side. But sometimes there's people come up with implementations that do not use that. They can actually implement some version of that with the JavaScript APIs. That is very cool. That's the kind of the bleeding edge, what you can do there.
Because shared element transitions are the hardest thing, right?
Yeah, because it kind of breaks the principles of React. Because React is it doesn't allow for reparenting of a view. You are rendered inside of your parent and you stay there forever. And shared element transition by principle move a view from one target to another target. And this is kind of a case on the web also. On web, the view transitions API has also been very recently introduced to be stable. I think Firefox was the last one to implement it to get it actually be available in all the major browsers.
How would you implement the view transitions underneath? Where you're basically using portals, or is it native code which you're using to move this node from another one? Where's the challenge there?
I mean, in view transitions, the behavior is a bit different than in our case. Because what they do is they take snapshot of the view that is, moving to another part of the document. With shared element transitions, we actually try to take the native view itself and move the exact instance. We do some copies in our case. We create a copy of that view. But for example, one case that is very different is videos. Because in terms of videos, if you take a snapshot of a video, it doesn't work. But if you take a video and move that instance or copy that instance with the same state to a new instance, then you can actually keep the continuity of the video playing. So that's one difference that we have with that.
So this is a more of a fun question. Codex or Claude?
Oh my God. tried codecs like briefly. I mostly used Claude. But recently I've been using Cursor, and it is mostly because they have the composer model, which has the fast mode.
Yeah,
and I kinda like working synchronously with the model. So you have it like there. For example, I was doing the workshops for the app.js conf, and I had to like prototype a few different ideas. It wouldn't really work if I like make it spin on like those few different ideas because I want to iterate quickly. So I was like, create me this example, and it like blurted it out, and I could actually like expect it, like improve it, work on it. I like that sometimes. And also, one thing that I like about those fast models that are good, like Composer Fast, is that sometimes I get like a nasty linker error with React Native or Reanimated or something like that. Like some build config is wrong. And it's like one stupid problem, you know? And I like put the error message in the model and it fixes it in an instant.
I guess you're basically, when you're developing, you're now like dispatching multiple agents, right?
Sometimes. It kind of overwhelms me sometimes. I try to do it sometimes. I would have to have a task that is like the agent can actually do it by itself and can test it. And oftentimes with animations, and especially in Animated, the things I have to mostly check manually. We don't have a way to test it automatically sometimes. And if I like dispatch many agents, then you know I have to like go back to this context, and it's actually more overwhelming that I would like.